Hello, my name is Richard Fisher. I'm here to do a presentation on water, and this is for the Stoke Village Hub. And the theme this time is to look at the history involving the element of water and its association with Stoke. Now, Stoke, even though it's on a hillock and it's quite high, is quite interesting because for millennia we've always had water bubbling up locally, even up this high hill. And when we look back at thousands of years, let's say looking at this slide, 12,000 years ago, we could see that the coast was way out to sea, as we know it today, as far as the Eddystone, where Smeaton's Lighthouse is. Well, Smeaton's Lighthouse used to be. And that's something like 12 miles away. But even so, with this map, we can see that the lines of the rivers of the time were still embedded far back as that. And it's the same with Stoke. We still have streams and water sources that were around at that time, still here in Stoke. At that time, we had a plethora of animals at the time that we don't seem to have anymore because they've mostly gone extinct, and also the terrain has changed as well. But still, water is so precious for sustaining life, even though the change of the demographics of the area and the seas coming in, the whole area has changed. But the streams and the way that water comes up from the earth is vital to sustain life. And here, up in Stoke, is perfect for a settlement way back in time. How long ago, we don't know, but it's perfect in every way. With water though, once you have a settlement and you have one of these wonderful places where the water comes up through the earth and it's clear water and it's drinkable water, it's precious. So much so because it does sustain life. There's nothing wrong with it. It gives you life. It's a magical thing and it's coming out the earth. So our ancestors looked at this thing. It's like a gift from Mother Earth, Danu. So we're looking at this water spurting out, giving us life. And once you've got that, it's like a birth. It's a place where mythical things would happen, magical things would happen. You cherished it, you looked after it. It would sustain not only just you, but it would give you magical things. So you could actually talk to it, give it some sort of sense of like mythology, as we know today. So it has nymphs or sprites that are around it. You could give motifs to it. You're actually like the Celtic way and in the Saxon way early days, it was like thanking for that water continuously flowing, like it still does today, continuously with fresh water from the same sources thousands of years ago. So over time, that source, where it came out of the earth, was a place where you would look after it. You would keep it clean. You would keep animals away from it unless they were further down. So you collected some of the water. Occasions would happen like you would do what they call nowadays well dressing, or give, when you wanted something like a wish, you could actually go to the water source and ask for a wish, leave something behind, saying, that's what I'm going to give you. I hope you can give me something back as a thank you, that sort of thing. All right. Now, these motifs are not only just for Stoke, it's like all over the country and into Europe. Water was very precious, and you could throw things into the water. Now, what we have here in this country was we adopted some of the things that ancient stone tools from the Stone Age time were found in streams and things like that. And we think that they may have been left there as like a thank you, that sort of thing, and also possibly a wish for something else. Now, we know from the Romans, when they came over, they had a tendency to throw coins into water for a wish, for a protection, or for a devout god of a certain spring. So they put a precious, iconic thing on sources of water. Now, when the Saxons were sort of turned into the Christian way of beliefs, these wells were known even then to the Christians coming over with their way of teaching, knew that these wells were precious to the community of which they were coming over with their religion at the time. So they really didn't want to upset anybody there. So they were looking at this God-like thing coming out of the earth and Christianizing them. So what you have dotted all still in Cornwall, some parts of Devon to this day, was these sources of water were changed into wells and springs, and they were given a Christian name. They also had Christian blessings, very similar to what the Celtics and the Saxons earlier Britons were doing anyway, but it was Christianized. So we still have well dressings and blessings to this day in certain parts of the country. Other parts of water, you have your springs and things like that, but what else you needed was you either made a man-made pond for your animals, so your spring would fill up a pond rather than flowing away down the stream, for your settlement. So if your settlement was high up on a hill, like it is in Stoke, you could make a man-made pond. And this man-made pond would be fantastic for your livestock. Birds, geese as well, things like that, could use that water, whereas your water for drinking, you stay at the source. And sometimes at the source, you would have a hand pump. Also with this pond, village pond, which Stoke has, and when you look at ancient maps of the time, you can actually find this pond, and here it is. It's on the corner of Bromley Place and Devonport Road, where you can see in this picture where a shop stands today, opposite the old Pear Tree Inn, which is on the other side of the road. It disappeared. Well, it disappeared, unfortunately, because of the nature of changing aspects in the Victorian period. But here it is, still in use, and it looked like it had a pump even then. So this is an ancient pond that was in situ right up until the Victorian times. The ponds were very useful as reservoirs of water that could be used for livestock, it could be used for cleaning or for the retting of flax. The water was very useful, but this wasn't drinkable water as such, but it was drinkable enough for your livestock, that sort of thing. But the source of water, where the spring was, let's say, is really your drinking water, the pure stuff. As it left the spring, it would then get more contaminated as it disappeared into the creeks further down, especially Stonehouse Creek. Retaining these drinking waters, you could have troughs. You could have, we know that ancient Saxons and that would have leather pouches and things like that to store like a hot water bottle. So you could carry water with you, and still people do today in little metal sort of containers. So really we still rely on water to replenish ourselves even today, but even then it was useful to carry some water with you. Looking at the high from at sea, looking at the rivers around you, they were also of interest because as the sea came in, mixed with the fresh water, you have a different type of fishing was happening. So with Stoke, it sits between two creeks. You have Keyham Creek north of us, and you have Stonehouse Creek south of us. These were quite vital for actually fishing, basically, in the old days. So we know that Stoke was a well-known place for cattle and sheep, and also in the Saxon times for cheese making, that sort of. So we know it's a dairy sort of farm place, but to have fish as well, found in the water, coming up streams as well, was very useful to fish for, and using fish traps like wicker traps that you could find today. Using these early boats, I mean, when you think you've got a cattle farm, let's say, you've got lots of hides to use, and you've got also the wicker that you could use, and reeds and things like that, to make quite basic boats to float in. So you could actually cross these creeks quite easily or fish in them. So water was actually sustaining life further down the creek, you might say, or further down the streams that were up high. This picture by Turner is about 1812, and it tells you, well, it shows you actually that Stoke hasn't changed much at all. It's still rural, it's still farmland, and it's still relying on lots of waters and springs and wells. I mean, there's lots of little ditty farms around. One was called Quint as well. So there's lots of microscopic farms, but things were changing in about 1820 when there's gentrification, there's an encroachment. But this picture, this lovely little painting by Turner, shows you how rural it still was, but you had the increase of houses beginning to encroach on the area. Now, going back to the fishing, this is an example of the fish nets that you could put in. Not nets as such, these were like wicker baskets that you could stake into the ground. So when the tide came in, the fish would go into these nets, yeah? And when the tide went out, they were trapped inside. So you could go out there, or literally walk over into the creek, pick up one of these baskets, hopefully full of fish or whatever is inside that's edible. What's amazing with Plymouth is, with this mixture of salt water and fresh water, you can get banks that dry out. And when that dries out, you have a residue of salt. And you can make these salt pans, which you really is another piece of essential need from water to actually make cheese and things like that, and actually used in tanning and all sorts of things, and dyes and that sort of thing. So from the water that was nearby, you could use the salt element to process things. With the increase, well, when you look at the terrain, and things changed when I was talking about the increase of housing coming here. We were talking about 1692, we have a new town called Dock, and that was Devonport, and that was situated on the western side of Stoke. And it was a great big development, and it soon mushroomed into a huge dock with walls, shipbuilding, and a massive population. And they needed water, and water was coming from Stoke, but not enough. So the people of, well, when you look at Stoke, you've got the major streams, and this diagram here just shows you, well, the map is actually from the 1840s. It's a Type map, but in that Type map, we've actually got wonderful illustrations of where these two major sort of streams were set. Well, I've named one of them St Anne's because that's where it starts from, St Anne's Lane. At the back of Stoke, you can still hear the water running still today. The other one I've named is Belmont Stream, which really sits where the Belmont House is today, but further down the garden. Now, these two streams were open to the air until fairly recently, but it just shows you how important it was for the area. Still, with the increase of houses, the farmland, it was open water, ready to replenish everything, but not enough really for the new town of Dock. And this new town of Dock required oodles of water, fresh water, not just for the shipbuilding and for the population, but also for the crews. The Navy itself needed fresh water on board ships, and a lot of that was coming from Plymouth. And there was a request out to Plymouth to say, we need more water for Devonport. And Plymouth wasn't quite happy with that, and actually said, we've got enough, cope with what you got. So it wasn't until another about 40 odd years later, we were talking about 1790s, that eventually Devonport had its own Leat, similar to Drake's Leat and Stonehouse Leat, which were built in the 1590s, 200 years earlier. So eventually the Leat was built. However, people abused this new channel of water. There was a couple of mills on there, but people were using the water for other uses, like cleaning, gutting fish, cleaning livestock, and all that sort of thing. So when the water eventually reached Devonport, most of it was quite contaminated. So 1830, idea of building more reservoirs. There was a few reservoirs, but they thought, right, we need one that's got a lot of pressure. The only place you're going to get a lot of pressure of water is build a reservoir on top of a hill. You've got natural gravity pulling down. So once you opened up your pipes, the pressure would come down and you've got fresh water coming out of your taps. The higher the hill, the higher the pressure. So Bowden had his wonderful reservoir built. It's a perfectly round reservoir. The reservoir contained enough water for the people of Devonport to have fresh water for up to 4 days, even if it didn't rain. Such was a good use of it. Now, when you look at the pipes, it's laid out to go to Devonport or go somewhere else, but it's not actually feeding the people of Stoke Village itself. Stoke Village still seems to rely on a pond and also the streams with pumps, quite strangely. This wonderful structure, though, was very useful. I mean, it lasted well up to the 1930s, just before the war, or just after the war maybe. And it was really still retaining water and still in use. It was also useful during the Second World War for putting out fires. It was a place to, use water. A lot of, let's say, a little snippet here is lots of children would love to play in that water, but it was quite dangerous once the suction underneath was drawn away. So nobody really wanted to play there, to be honest with you. But it was successful. Now, when this was built in the 1830s, this is actually a couple of very rare photographs of the structure sitting behind the buildings as such. Even today, when you look at it, you can still see the circumference of the reservoir. It's still round with slightly rounded trees, as you can see, once you go around and have a look at that area. 1830s is an interesting period. It's when Regency, Georgian period, and there was an interest in what the king was doing at the time. So when the king, a lot of people didn't bathe very well in water. They liked drinking with it, that sort of thing. But things changed in the Georgian and the Regency period. It was a trend to actually bathe in water. They were looking at the Roman things they were finding in Italy and really sort of like inspired by the idea of actually bathing in hot water. We have Bath still today. It's still there today, bubbling up hot water. It's quite magical. But people had the idea of having hot baths, going to places like that. Unfortunately, we know today that you take your clothes off or you take a few clothes off to go bathing, to go swimming. But in the Regency and Georgian period, they didn't think about that. So they used to bathe fully clothed and have parties as well. So even by the 1870s, when I had showed you the map with the pond in, you could see the encroachment of houses beginning to come up from Devonport and slightly from Stonehouse. But it wasn't really encroaching too much because there was quite a few grand houses, which we've spoken about before. And interspersed with that was lots of nurseries. So the water was really feeding the town with all sort of crops like vegetables and that sort of thing. So the whole place was really a nursery. So it's changing from a farmland as such into a place where it was giving more food to the locals. But that was soon to change, especially when the dockyard was getting bigger and bigger and steamships needed to be produced. So the dock moved northwards. Morice Yard, Keyham Steam Yard came along. So when Keyham Steam Yard came along, 1880s, the whole nature of the place, 1890s, 1880s, the whole nature of the terrain changed, especially up north, which is the Keyham Creek. Now, Keyham Creek then became filled in, and it's now a park today. Later on, we had Stonehouse Creek, and that too disappeared and was filled in as well. So we have now two areas of water that completely gone piped. The streams, the increase of more houses, the demand for more water. Now the water was very basic still, but there was a demand for it. So a lot of the water was confined into pipes, and the streams were mostly piped as well. However, with all this water for these new houses, the sanitation wasn't that good, and there was a spread of diseases as well. So once you've got your water, getting rid of it was actually being flushed into the old creek system, and we have outbreaks of things like cholera and that sort of thing, which is not good. Demand also for the well-to-do houses was increasing as well, with hot tubs, nice laundries, that sort of thing. All the different type of clothing people need, they wanted it wonderfully clean, starch, that sort of thing. All these effluents and things were getting into the water, contaminating them. So even today, some of the piped water from these streams you cannot drink from. Remarkably, not all the streams were piped. Here, looking at this St Anne's stream, if you go to the back of Ponsonby Place and look back into the valley there, you can see the stream is still flowing today 24/7 every day of the year, as it has been doing for over 12,000 years. It's still there, you can still see it, and it's just remarkable it survived. This slide here, actually, with water, as we know, it doesn't also come out the streams, it comes from above. We have rain, and like I was saying, people weren't, they looked forward to a rainy day because it looks like they're going to wash their clothes, that sort of thing, and just walked about as we do, or as they did then, just sort of like a shower. Let's have a shower. I'm being cleaned, my hat's being cleaned, my clothes are being cleaned. However, with a downpour, it could be overwhelming. However, in the 19th century, there's lots of trends and things that were changing. People had more clothes, more delicate bits and pieces. So being out in the rain was not the best thing. So people used to have capes to cover themselves from rain. However, from France became a new invention, the umbrella. And Jonas Hanway brought it to England for the first time, and when it was seen, it was laughed at and thought he's an idiot. What a stupid man to be protecting himself from water. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for looking.